We're looking at the subject of world evangelization, looking at what has been done, what needs to be done to fulfill the Great Commission. This particular lesson I'm calling the World Village. The World Village. And what I want us to do in this lesson is to take the big picture and let's shrink it down to a size that we can understand and makes sense to us. Let's imagine shrinking the world's population down to a village of 100 people. 100 people. And so that's on terms that everybody can grasp and understand. And of course, some of these, the percentages will be off a little bit, but not much. It will be within the talking range, within the ballpark figure here. So let's imagine shrinking our world down to a village of 100 people. This is what our village would look like. First of all, let's talk about population. Population. Who would be the people that would live in our village of 100? Well, Asians. Asians, there are more Asians than anyone else in the world. 57 of our village of 100 would be Asians. Europeans would add another 21. 21 Europeans in our village. There would be 8 Africans, and then what is called the Americas, North, Central, and South America, there would be 14 people. So that's the way the ratio would break down. 57 Asians, 21 Europeans, 8 Africans, and 14 Americans. This would be the people that live inside our village of 100 people. Now let's look at it in another way. Let's look at the racial mix-up. How the makeup would be made of the percentages of the different races of people. In our village of 100, 70 of them would be what we call people of color. Now, when we say people of color, which is really a term I'm not that fond of because white is also a color. But we're talking about people that are not white. 70 out of our 100 would be people that are not white. There are a range of colors, of brown, of black, of yellow. There's just a combination there. But the majority of our world would not, it's not our world, but our village of 100 would not be white. So what I'm saying is, it would be a very colorful village made up of all different races of people in our village of 100. Another way we need to look at our village of 100 would be with religion. Religion. What would be the religious makeup of our village of 100? Well, first, Christians. Christians would be the largest percentage. 31 out of our village of 100 would be Christian. That's almost 1/3. Close to 1/3 would be Christian. Muslims would be second. Muslims, approximately 24 out of our village of 100. In other words, 1/4 of that village would be Muslim. The third would be Hindus. Hindus would make up 15. 15 of our village of 100 would be Hindu. And then the remaining, well, I'm going to just call other because the largest group would be the Buddhist, but then you've got all the different kinds of religions around the world, plus those that are non-religious. The non-religious make about 15. So about half of these 30 would be non-religious, and the other 15 would be just an assortment of all kinds of religions that people worship. And that's their style of worship. So Christians 31, Muslims 24, Hindu 15, and then the other is 30. But here's a statistic I want to drive home. In our village of 100, there would be 28 people that had never one time heard about Jesus Christ. That is our responsibility in fulfilling the Great Commission. If we're going to fulfill the Great Commission, we've got to focus on reaching these 28 that have never heard one time about Jesus Christ. And the question remains, why should anybody hear the gospel twice until everybody has heard it once? Now, another area that I want to talk about is the area of education. Education. In our village of 100, there would be 17 that cannot read or write. 17 that would be illiterate. And then when you look at the overall village, over half of them would only have a very basic education. And by basic, I'm saying, and this is about 30% of them, they only are able to just read and write. They do not have a high school education. It would be what we would call primary school, just a very limited education, barely able to read and write and to function in our world. That would be the makeup of the education. Only 6 out of our village of 100 would have a college degree. Only 6. And so it shows the disproportioned way of educating our world, our village. Everybody doesn't have the same opportunities. It's been one of the things that's been a focus on my life since I began international travels, and that is to help train, equip, and educate Christian leaders all over the world. I'm not interested in people being convinced I'm a good preacher. That's not my goal. My goal is I want them to think their pastor's a good preacher. So if I can improve his education, if I can help him do a better job, his success becomes my success. That's been the very premise from which I have worked for many, many years. Now, one of the statistics I have learned that really interests me is over half, over 50 out of our village of 100 speak either English or Spanish as a primary or secondary language. Over half. Now, that is an amazing statistic, because with English and Spanish, potentially you have the ability to connect and communicate with half of our world. And there's a reason why that I'm doing what I'm doing today, of taking everything that I've learned, everything that I've been able to study, and trying to put it on video, and then voice that over into Spanish. Because with English and Spanish, half the world becomes my parish. I'm able to reach out to people, billions of people all around the world. Now, let me talk about a fifth area. And this one is a very shocking one to me. In fact, it's very difficult for me to understand even what I understand. It's hard to comprehend this fact of income, the finances, the income of the people in our village of 100 people. In this village of 100, 25 of them would live on $3.20 a day or less. Now, I know that for many people they say that's impossible. You can't do that. Yes, they do it because they live off the land. They only eat what they grow or what they're able to barter and trade with somebody else. That's the way they live. They live off the land. They don't have money. I'm going to talk more about China in a few moments, but China, for instance, in my travels, as I went out into the rural areas of China and discovered that was the average income for the Chinese farmer, $3 a day. And it's the reason that they're having this massive movement of people moving from the farms into the cities, because in the city, even the low-paying jobs is around $5 a day. And if they could get a good job, they could make like $10 a day. That's 3 times as much as they can make on the farm. And it's why they're having so many people move from the rural areas into the cities. So 25 out of our village of 100 would live on $3.20 a day. Here's another shocking one. 50 out of our world, now that includes the 25, of course, but 50 out of our village of 100 would live on $5.50 a day. Now, I've gone back and researched this. These are the latest statistics I'm able to come up with from the United Nations. They tell us this is the statistics from 2017. And they've got a better handle on it than anybody else in the world. 1/2 the world lives on $5.50 a day. 50 out of our village of 100. Now, those are shocking statistics, because for the majority of us, we cannot even begin to comprehend, can't even comprehend statistics like this. Now, here's another one that we need to try to grasp here in the United States. 40% of the wealth of our village would be in the hands of 6 United States citizens. 40% of the wealth in this village of 100 would be in the hands of 6 United States citizens. Those are shocking statistics, but it shows the responsibility that we have. We do not think of ourselves as being wealthy, rich, affluent, but we are, friend. We are. God has blessed us abundantly. What are we going to do with the finances, the resources that God has given to us? Are we going to do our best to make sure those 28 in our village hear the good news of Jesus Christ? Are we going to share it with them? Or are we going to take our resources and only spend them on ourselves? God help us not to do that. God help us to understand how wealthy we actually are and what a responsibility we have to 1/2 of our village that lives on $5.50 a day. Oh, God, help us to share the good news with them. Now, let me talk about a couple of other areas that tie directly to the financial situation. First one, number 6, nutrition. Nutrition. This is the food that we are eating. In our village of 100, 1/2 of them, 50 of them, would be hungry. Now, by hungry, I'm simply saying they just are not getting everything that they really want to eat. They're never really satisfying their hunger. Now, it's hard for many people to grasp this because of the abundance of food that we have in the Western world, in the United States. We have more food than we actually eat, more than we should. We don't eat that smart because we're eating what we like, what we want, rather than what we need, what we should be eating. But half the world doesn't have that privilege, my friend. 1/2 the world is hungry. And then when you look at those that are the poorest of the poor, 25 in our village of 100 is slowly dying from malnutrition. Those are shocking figures. Shocking figures. 25 in our village of 100 are slowly dying from malnutrition. They're not getting what they need, not just what they want, would like to have, but they're not getting what they need to keep their bodies alive. And it's why so many diseases break out among them, because they're not healthy. They don't have a healthy diet. And because of this, disease is rampant among them. And there becomes these worldwide pandemics of disease that break out in our world. Why? Because 25 in our village are not even getting enough food to keep themselves alive. They are slowly dying from malnutrition. Now let me talk about the seventh area. The seventh area, again, is connected with finances, and that is housing. Where do these people live? Where do they live in our village of 100? The majority of them, in fact, 80 out of our village of 100 lives in what we would call substandard housing. That's a very nice way of saying they live in slums. They live in terrible conditions. This has been one of the most heartbreaking things that I've experienced in my travels around the world, is going into the cities and then going into the mountains among the poorest of the poor. And it's indescribable to see the living conditions where they live, how bad it is. 80 out of the 100 live in substandard housing. For instance, here's a statistic that will make you think. Out of our village of 100, 40 of them have never once used a telephone. 40 out of our village of 100. We think of everybody's got a phone. No, everybody doesn't have a phone. There's 40 of them out of our village of 100 that have never one time used a telephone. And then what about television? What about TVs? Only 25 in our village of 100 would have a television. There's so many of them, approximately 30 of them, that do not even live within range of a TV station. The only way they would ever be able to pick up a TV signal would be by satellite, because they live so far remote from television stations. 30 out of the 100 don't even live in range of a TV. So only 25 even own a TV. Now, this helps us to grasp the world picture, the world in which we live. It's a picture of our world. And our village of 100 people, this is the way that they live and die, because this is the way we live where we are. And we tend to think that this is the way the world is. But no. This is the way the world is right here. But this is not the world in which we live. The world in which we live is a vast, different picture. And so my question comes back to, why should anyone hear about Jesus Christ twice until everybody has heard of him once? See, I wish that we could eradicate all world poverty. That is foolish thinking. It's never going to be done. Jesus said it. The poor you have with you always. And there will always be poor people. I believe we should do what we can to help them. We should do everything that we can to minister to their needs, heal the hurting. That's a part of our responsibility. But there will always be poor people. But there is one thing that we can make sure gets done. And that is that everybody hears the good news of Jesus Christ. Because the truth is, this world is so temporary. It is such just a short time, and then our world ends. I'm talking about our natural life. It's over, but there is eternity that is ahead of us. And so, while they're still here, while they're still with us, let's give them the light of Jesus Christ while there's still time. Before they die, they deserve to hear the good news of Christ. Oh, let this become a part of your very being, the very fabric of your soul. I'm going to do what I can to make sure that everybody hears the good news of Jesus Christ. I want to tell a story that radically changed my life. I've been involved in ministry since I was just a boy. I have been preaching full-time ministry now over 50 years. that I've been traveling and preaching. But over 30 years ago, about 32 years ago, God began to deal with me about devoting my life, dedicating my life to making sure the gospel goes out to the ends of the earth. And in becoming involved in what we call international ministry, sharing the gospel around the world. I went to Mexico, and I want to tell you the story about a little Mexican boy. Changed my life. I was never the same after that day. We were in central Mexico, in the state of San Luis Potosí. There's a town there that is called Tamazunchale. And it's a mountain town, just a small town, very Mexican. They at that time when I was there 30 years ago, they certainly didn't have any of the modern restaurants, modern hotels and such. The place where we stayed was very, very basic. Just a very basic hotel. It was clean, it was comfortable to stay there, but just the basic things of life. In other words, if you got clean sheets and no bugs, and you've got hot water, it's up in the mountains, so it's cool, and it's safe, nobody's going to break in. That was a good place. It was a good place to stay. And but one of the gentlemen that was in our group needed to make a phone call to the U.S. It was very important that he get this message through, and so we had to go to what was called the long distance service. And that was a business that had a connection where they can make international calls. Sometimes it would take hours to get a phone call through. So we got up very early in the morning. We were there when the place just began to open up, and we went in. This was associated with a hardware store, and they had this long distance service as a part of their business. And so he's trying to get his phone call through, and all of a sudden I spotted something over by the wall. It was very dim because the sun had not fully arisen, and so I could hardly tell. At first I thought it was a dog. As I walked closer, I saw it was a little Mexican boy. A little boy asleep on the floor. And of course I'm looking at him. He's probably about 8 years of age. And I turned around to the proprietor, and we began talking with him about the little boy. And he was very awkward about it. He said, yes, he's a little boy from the mountains, a village about 30 minutes from here. He's come to town because his father is dead, his mother is sick. He come looking for work, trying to find work. And he said, I let him sleep in my store so he doesn't have to sleep on the streets. And he seemed, very awkward about it, but he was being kind, trying to protect the little boy. And so we asked him, well, sir, do you mind if we go? We take him, get him something to eat. And the man said, oh, no, that'd be wonderful. That'd be very good if you would take him, and anything you could do to help him. So we waked the little boy up. It was hard waking him up. He was so sound asleep. We got him up, and he's rubbing his eyes, and we started explaining to him, son, we want to help you. We want to do something for you. We'd like to take you and get you something to eat. And are you hungry? And he was. And so he said, okay. So we go out. All they had was sidewalk cafes. They didn't have nice sit-down restaurants and such. You just had little sidewalk tables where you sit down on the side by the sidewalk and order, and they bring the food to you. That's all that they had. So we're sitting at this little sidewalk cafe, and we tell the little boy, anything you want to order, we will pay for it. Buy anything that you want. And he looks up with those big brown eyes, and he says, can I have a cup of coffee? And I said, oh, yes, of course you're going to have a cup of coffee. You can have anything that you want. Just tell us, and we'll order it for you, and we will pay for it. And he looks back, and he says, can I have a piece of bread? Well, by that time, he's got me crying. He just tore me all apart because such a precious child, such a humble child. And so I called the waitress over, and I ordered everything I could think of. It'd be what we would call steak and eggs. I ordered him the biggest breakfast. They couldn't even get it in an ordinary plate. They had to bring almost like a platter to get all of this food on it. And the little boy sat there, and ate every bite. Oh, it broke my heart. We did what we could to help get him some clothes. All of his toes, I'm talking about all of his toes, were sticking out of his little tennis shoes. Rags, just holes all through his clothes. I know that there are people that got so much money that they buy designer clothes. It's got holes in them. This little boy didn't have any designer clothes. He was just a poor little Mexican boy. I left that day with my heart breaking because I know in Mexico alone, there's 50,000 more just like him in Mexico alone. Not talking about all the other nations of the world. And so I left there that day, my heart breaking and saying, oh God, give me a bigger heart. A bigger heart. Help me to be able to help children like this, to help minister to their needs. Now, it still touches me very deeply today because I realize this is our world. This is where we live. We do not live in a world that's full of affluence. We do not live in a world that everybody has all they want to eat. No, we live in a world where people are hungry, where people are dying, where people have never heard the gospel. See, friend, this is our world. It's in our hands. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to share the good news of Jesus Christ? Or are we going to keep it to ourselves? Are we going to link arms with people that are making a difference all around our world? Or are we going to selfishly spend it on ourselves? God help us not to make that mistake, my friend. God has given us the opportunity. Let's make a difference in the world in which we live. It's our world. He has given us the Great Commission. Let's get the job done and do it right.